Hello, my name is Greg Massi, and this is The Color of Air, a podcast about the musical journey. So welcome back. We are now up to episode 12, and this episode is a little bit delayed by a few days, and the reason is, as I mentioned before, my focus this month has really been on promoting the new Kayo Dot album. And supporting my friends. And my goal was to have my interview with Toby up this week. But it isn't going to happen, or it's not going to be up until next week. And there's no major issue surrounding it. At first, I was worried about the audio quality. It was a little bit of a noisy recording. But that seems to be okay. But part of it, too, is just in terms of promoting the new Kayo Dot album, which comes out in October, I want to be able to play some new songs for you, but you got to understand that when I play songs from musicians, especially songs for albums that are unreleased, it's very important to me to get their permission to do so. And when I was talking with Toby about the interview, and I asked about that, he did mention that the record label Flenser has a very specific release strategy in mind for it, and so they're only putting songs out, a couple songs out before the album is actually released. So I'm gonna wait until next week to post my interview with Toby, because I believe by that point they'll have released the second song, and I'll be able to kind of highlight the two songs that they've put out to. For release, if that makes any sense. And so my other big interview for this month is going to be Byron, who is the vocalist and lyricist in Maudlin and has written a bunch of lyrics for Kayo Dot albums over the years. And we were hanging out together last weekend. We had gone down to the Cape for a wedding of a mutual friend of ours, and we talked about maybe finding a time. It's hard with him because he works a very different schedule than I do. So he doesn't have a traditional weekend the way I have a weekend. So it takes us a while to find a good day for me to go up to his house and do that. So I'm hoping that'll be done and ready for the last week or the last episode of September, so that for this entire month you'll get a little bit of couple different aspects of the Kayo Dot story. And before I move on, I do want to say a big thank you to the enormous response you guys gave us for the Ron Verode episode. It set all kinds of records for this podcast. It is now the number one downloaded podcast of every interview we've done. And even by doing that, Ron promoted it on the Kayo Dot page on Facebook. We found a whole bunch of new listeners, people who said they had never heard of this podcast, but were now subscribing. And as a result, the numbers on the other episodes have gone up too, which shows me that we attracted a whole bunch of new listeners, and they liked what they heard, and are revisiting some of the older interviews. And I just want to say thank you. Thanks, first of all, to Ron for doing the interview and then for promoting it. And then thank you to the fans who continue to download, and the new fans who are just discovering us. Thanks. So before we get to today's episode, because it's a very weird episode today, let me first get our plugs out of the way. So as always, you can find us at www.colorofair.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/colorofairpodcast. You can tweet us at The Color of Air. And you can email us colorofairpodcast@gmail.com. And for anything to do with my musical projects, you can go to www.retconrecordings.com. So, in between trying to get the schedule together with Byron and finishing up the the Toby interview, I didn't have a guest for this week. And I could have scrambled to maybe try and find somebody I could Skype with. But then I had this idea that since I'm focusing on Kayo Dot, and given the fact that I'm a original member of the band, I thought it might be interesting to field some questions. I had asked out for some questions prior to when I recorded with Toby, but I didn't get any responses. So that was, that idea fell flat then. But this time I put out the call, and again, Ron from Kayo Dot posted it on the Kayo Dot official page, and I got a whole bunch of responses. So it, seemed like a good idea to just sit back. It's just going to be me, and I'm not really going to interview myself, but I'm going to answer questions that you guys submitted to me either through the email or through the Facebook page. And again, I'll just say again, if you have any questions, please, about anything, just send them to colorofairpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to answer them either on email or on this podcast. And we'll see how this episode goes. If you guys like this, maybe we'll do some more question and answer sessions. But for now, sit back and relax. I have poured myself a couple drinks in a shaker, and we are going to sit back. And, well, let me also rephrase. I'm not driving tonight. I'm staying home for the rest of the night. Not going out and doing fun things on a Saturday night. I'm sitting here. I just finished doing some overtime for my little day job, and now I'm sitting here with you answering your questions, and I'm going to relax with a couple drinks. You like the sound effects there? I made sure to pour it in front of the microphone to make sure that works. Okay, time to get to the questions. Actually, before I go to the questions, it's my podcast, and a lot of these questions ended up veering towards the Maudlin of the Well days, which is fine. And, it was funny for me because I was just thinking about Maudlin of the Well a lot this week. I actually was revisiting some of the old Maudlin of the Well stuff. And, unlike Kayo Dot, I think there's a kind of air of mystery that surrounds Maudlin of the Well, only because we were out at a time when social media really wasn't around the way it is now. And, we really were only active as a live ensemble for about 2.5 years. So, there's not a lot of people who I guess know a lot about us. And so that's why a lot of these questions kind of, veer towards that. But since I play music on this podcast, let's get started with some Maudlin of the Well, shall we? So I'm going to play Heaven and Weak, which is off the Bath album. And the reason why I'm playing this is this week, or last week I should say, I began the process of writing guitar solos for Balisette's next album. And when I'm in the process of writing guitar solos, it actually takes me a while to get in there and really get ideas that I really like. And it's a lot of work. And there's always this moment when I start working on a guitar solo where nothing comes out. And I get this feeling, oh, geez, I've lost, my creativity. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm the shittiest guitar player that's ever lived. Blah, 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 blah. And I was at work, or coming home from work, I think. My iPod was on shuffle, or my Spotify was on shuffle. Something where I listen to music was on shuffle. And Heaven and Weak came on. And sometimes when Maudlin of the Well comes on, because I know the songs, I've lived with them for so long, sometimes I'll skip over them. Maybe I'm not in the mood to listen to them. But this one day I did. And when I heard the guitar solo in Heaven and Weak, I was really impressed at myself. I can say that, right? That's not too egotistical. I was very happy with what I did on that song, lead guitar-wise. And it helped because it helped remind me what I'm capable of when I really put my mind to it. And so since we're going to be talking about Maudlin the Well, and I was rediscovering the stuff I did with Maudlin the Well, let's start with that, and then we'll come back with your questions. So here is Heaven and Weak off of Bath.
Swan's wings, bloodied at the joint, and pasted to a boy's back, like in that story. You waved to me from a mountain as I slipped away, dimming into rust-lit winters with the burning apple.
Okay, and we're back. Taking another sip of the drink. And let's get into the questions that you guys submitted to me. This first one came via email from Marco Mayer, and he had 2 questions in it. What is the answer to the bath leaving your body map puzzle? And second question, how hard was it to play Maudlin of the Well stuff live? Those are 2 very cool questions, Marco, so thank you. In terms of the puzzle for bath and leaving your body map, which some of you may not be aware of, there is a puzzle. I'm going to have to defer that one. And maybe, you know what, I'll bring it up when I talk with Byron, because see, Byron was the one who really came up with that idea. He came up with, he was really getting into numerology and, symbolism and things like that around the time we were doing Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. So he constructed this amazing kind of interconnected puzzle, which, connects the 2 albums, connects the lyrical themes, and kind of creates this whole other thing out of them. And it's very hard to decode. So I don't really want to try and explain it myself because I have a very rudimentary understanding of it. I lived with him at the time, so, I was privy to a lot of the knowledge of what he was doing, but I could probably not explain it as well as he can. And so I will defer that until I meet with him in a couple weeks, and hopefully we'll see if he wants to reveal it. Otherwise, he might just give you a little bit of a tidbit of knowledge. And then, we're still hoping someone else will maybe figure it out on their own. But as to your second question, how hard was it to play Maudlin of the Well songs live? That's a good question, because at the time, it was very hard. Because when Maudlin of the Well was around, they were kind of my first performing band. I had performed in college with different ensembles, which is a story for another day. I can tell you about my experiences playing in the Providence College pep band and playing in the jazz band and all these other things. But Maudlin of the Well was the first kind of real original rock music that I was doing live. And when we started doing shows in 2000, I had never been in a band to that level. So at first it was very difficult for me. I mean, the parts, not all the parts were very hard. some were quite difficult because, as Ron and I alluded to, Toby, who wrote most of the music, or all the music pretty much, or all the songs, he comes at it from a very different perspective technique wise. So learning his ideas was very, very hard for me at first, and it's something I had gotten better at over time. Especially by the time we got to the Kayo Dot years. But some of the riffs were pretty easy. Like, for instance, a Conception Pathetic off of My Fruit Psychobells. It's a very kind of straightforward riff. It's fun as hell to play. I know it probably wasn't our most innovative song or our most expansive song, but it was a lot of fun to play, and I always enjoyed doing that one. So it ranged from that to probably the hardest song for me was Curve That to an Angle Turned. And the reason why is because there's a lot of guitar parts in that song which were ones that I kind of did. I used to, when we played it live, I used to start off the riff. And being able to come in and play a riff without accompaniment, and have it start with the right tempo so that not to screw up the rest of the band, to get the right feel, the right tone, that one was very, very difficult for me. So, it was always kind of a struggle. But, when I got it right, it sounded really good. And, there was a few other ones. Blight of River Systems, I remember being fairly difficult to nail because that was one of the few songs that had kind of a really kind of techie, almost math rock little thing in the middle of the song, and trying to do that was fucking hard. The guitar solos were easy, of course, because I wrote those, but the rest of that song, again, it's not just about technique with Maudlin of the Well. A lot of it was capturing the right vibe, the right tone. And at that time, I was still very, very much a novice when it came to that. I was just learning, I finally had an amplifier, a really big, powerful tube amplifier, and learning the dynamics. The songs in Maudlin of the Well are very, very based on dynamics. And if you get the dynamics wrong, well, it can screw up the whole band. So that was a very big thing. So to answer your question in a simpler way than that big long-winded response, some of the songs were definitely very hard to pull off live, given my experience level at the time. Yeah, so thank you. I hope that answers your question. And now we'll go to the questions that came to the post I did on our Facebook page. And there's a few of these questions, so let me try and answer them in a good order. So, first question comes from Dylan Sonderman, and he asks, what role did lucid dreaming and or astral projection play in the creation of the music and or lyrics? Which I believe he's talking about Maudlin of the Well. Again, I feel like I can't really answer this question as accurately as it needs to be because I didn't write the music or the lyrics. For Byron, I will double check with him. I'm pretty sure, I know he had done probably some things with lucid dreaming and astral projection practice, but really that was, in my memory, that was mostly Toby's thing. And I believe it did play a part. I can't say for sure exactly how much. The one story that I'm pretty sure is correct is he mentioned, I think he's mentioned before, that the song Interlude 4 off of Leaving Your Body Map was something that came to him in a dream. And he... he had tuned his guitar to a specific tuning, D, F sharp, C sharp, E. And he had this vision in a dream about this song the song came to him in the dream, and when he woke up, he grabbed the guitar and started playing it, and that became Interlude 4. So I believe I'm telling that story right. So in that regards, it had a big part to play with it. I don't know how much he was trying to astral project at the time, or if that really counts as a lucid dream, but that had a big impact on our music. And to kind of go back to Marco's question about the puzzle between the two albums, I will tell you that every song that has the D, F sharp, C sharp, E tuning all play a very important part in the puzzle, specifically the interludes. So take that for what it's worth. But thank you, Dylan. That was a great question, and something I think that comes up a lot, because dreaming was a very big part of what we were doing at the time. Okay, here's a non-Maudlin on the Wall question. Alan Thompson wrote, name your top 5 progressive rock albums released in the 1970s. Great question. I'm still a very much a learning prog rock fan, because I didn't really get into it really hardcore until about maybe 5 years ago. There were certain things that stood out to me before that, but I've become more and more of a prog rock fan as we've gone along. So my number one album, and it's just from the most recent years, is definitely Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. The concept album to end all concept albums. Some people might go with a Passion Play, because that's another concept album they did that was through composed and was a little more serious in tone. But I always go back to Thick as a Brick. I spent a lot of time listening to that album in the last 5 or so years, and that had a tremendous influence on how I'm doing music now. Just the fact that there were parts in that which were technical to an extent. There's a big long drum solo in it. There's little instrumental flourishes here and there. But at the heart of that entire song, because it is just one giant song, is really Ian Anderson's guitar playing. He's known for the flute playing, but his acoustic guitar playing is something which is a huge influence, and I think people maybe don't realize how good of a guitar player he is, and just how good he is at creating these kind of cool, simple chord progressions that he kind of adds like little flourishes to, little nuances, and then his voice, and then the lyrics. I mean, it's kind of comedy, because for those of you who don't know Thick as a Brick, it was the lyrics were constructed to be a poem written by a 9-year-old, which won a contest, and then subsequently they found out it was plagiarized. And but when you listen to the lyrics, I mean, it's some of it's goofy, some of it's weird, but it's a very cool, irreverent kind of poem, and talking about I guess what it was like to live in England in the 70s, and it's wonderful. So Thick as a Brick is definitely number one for me. Number two, and this is probably going to cause some grief with people, but I'm going to have to go with Rush, Hemispheres. When it comes to prog rock, I feel like there's a definite division between Rush fans and then the rest of the prog rock fans. And I don't know why that is. I guess I'll have to ask somebody else who maybe knows more than I do. But Hemispheres was an album I got in the late 90s, and that was really another huge album for me in terms of learning about things and how to put together songs, especially long songs. There is a song I'm working on for the new Ballad album, which is roughly about 21 minutes long right now. and it's very much inspired by the song Hemispheres and 2112. There's a lot of aspects to the structure of the piece which I drew consciously from those two songs. And in terms of guitar playing, Alex Lifeson of Rush is one of my favorite guitar players of all time. He's not a very technical guitar player in terms of his solos, but his creativity is really what influenced me more than anything else. And in his guitar solos, he might do some shreddy things that sound kind of cool, but he does them in this kind of weird way that sounds uniquely like him, and not like Steve Vai or something like that. And the way he used whammy bar and vibrato, the way he used open strings with his bar chords, specifically, the intro to, I think it's around the intro of Hemispheres, the dun 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 dun. If you listen to it, I mean, he's just moving this one major bar chord shape around the neck, and he's only fretting, for those of you who are guitar players, he's only fretting the bottom four strings, and the open E string and the open B string are always there. And the picking pattern that he does as he moves the chord, it starts on the F sharp, and then it goes up to the B, then to the A, and then to the D. And, by plucking the E, G, and B strings, the E and B are always the same note, but the note on the G string is always different. And so it creates this interesting melody, along with the fact that his lower three strings are making essentially a power chord. And so you get this kind of like heavy dun 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 dun, and this really beautiful chimey melody up at the top. And I think that was something that which influenced me greatly, like how you can make your chord progressions have melody and have kind of a cool musical identity of their own. So that was number 2. And wow, this question is going to go on for a while, I guess. All right. So number 3, I'm going to have to go with Genesis, Selling England by the Pound. Another album I discovered in college, and I would not say it's a flawless album. I think there's bits on that album I don't really, I wouldn't say it's flawless, but the first song on that album, Dancing with the Moonlit Night, was one of those songs which really introduced me to what prog rock could be, and just the emotions and the moods and the lyrics, the riffs, the keyboard parts, everything was perfect in that song. And I've been obsessed with it for years. And there's other great songs on that album. I Know What You Like is a really cool song. It's kind of goofy but fun. And Firth of Fifth is probably one of my all-time favorite songs, along with Dancing with the Moonlit Night. I've come to appreciate it more recently, really getting into Steve Hackett's guitar playing. His guitar solo on Firth of Fifth is just transcendent, and it's very simple. He's known for actually kind of originating, or maybe not originating, but doing the whole tapping thing, which Eddie Van Halen kind of took, got a lot of credit for. But he was doing it before Eddie Van Halen, but specifically on Dancing with the Moonlit Night. But on Firth of Fifth, the solo is not a technical exploration by any means. It's just this beautiful, fluid song, which, given the nature of the kind of like oceanic vibe of the song, it's kind of this rising out of the deep guitar playing, which is fucking phenomenal. So I recommend that album highly as well. Number 4, let's go with Yes, and there's a couple different choices I could go with, but let's go with is it Fragile? I forget. Hold on, I'm going to Wikipedia while I am talking to you. This is very unprofessional, I will put it that way. but there's a couple different Yes albums that I really, really, really love. Okay, no, it's not Fragile. Although I do love Fragile as well. But the one I'm thinking of is... Be nice if I typed right while I was doing it. Close to the Edge. Close to the Edge, you know, to me, again, it's a song, it's an album that I just recently kind of came to appreciate. Yes was always a tough band for me to get into, but once I did, they've become kind of an obsession. And Close to the Edge is brilliant. And one thing about Yes that I really appreciate is that at the heart of their music, kind of like with the Jethro Tull, is you have these glorious compositions, these crazy time signatures, and all the other kind of accoutrements that kind of come with prog rock and technical music. But at the heart of what Yes does are these very simple chord progression based songs, sung by not Ian Anderson, that's Jethro Tull. Sorry, sung by John Anderson. And his voice is just so beautiful, and his lyrics are just so meaningful to me. They speak of kind of positivity, and there's just a really cool beauty to what he brings to it, and couple that with just amazing musical performances, by Steve Howe, who's an amazing guitar player. Bill Bruford, before he left to join King Crimson, and Chris Squire. I mean, and Rick Wakeman, of course. So yeah, that we'll go with Yes. And I could go with Fragile. There's some really cool stuff on Fragile, which I love. Relayer is another very, I think, underrated Yes album. There's some beautiful moments on that one, specifically The Gates of Delirium, which is the big long song on that. It's a crazy song. There's so much involved in it, and then when you think you've reached this kind of chaotic point in it, this beautiful thing comes up at the end of the song, which I believe they edited into a radio edit and just called it Soon, based on the lyrics. But that just it's a mind-blowing thing. So I guess you could just put we'll put Relayer in there too. So number 4, we'll tie it with Yes. We'll say Close to the Edge and Relayer. And 5, well, I don't know what to tell you. There's still some bands I'm still discovering. I know a lot of you are probably expecting me to say King Crimson, and nothing against King Crimson. I just haven't gotten into them as much as other people have. Not that I don't have respect for them. There's a lot of great music I've done. I love 21st Century Schizoid Man. In the Court of the Crimson King. I mean, that whole album is just beautiful. But I know that album is so different from the rest of their discography that I don't just want to say that. But they're a band that I'm still kind of discovering. So I can't say with any certainty that any of their albums are my favorite of the 70s. I'm going to go a little obscure for my 5th one, because there's a bunch of other bands. Obviously Emerson, Lake and Palmer, again, which I don't really have a ton of experience with. We can go with Kansas. You could go with Gentle Giant. And I guess I'm just going to go a little weird. This isn't necessarily a prog rock band, maybe, but Uriah Heep, Demons and Wizards. Another just phenomenal band, phenomenal album. And I'm getting way too long-winded with this question, so I won't go into too much more detail. But, it's funny to me how bands, when they think of, or musicians, when they think of groups who have very distinctive keyboard players, obviously you think of Rick Wakeman. On the rock side, you tend to think of John Lord from Deep Purple as being kind of the king of the Hammond organ sound, which he was. but Uriah Heep also had a very distinctive kind of Hammond organ sound, which I think is pretty remarkable. So we'll go with that. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, but thank you, Alan, for that question. Okay, back to the Maudlin of the Well questions. All right, Michael Sinclair writes, what ethnogens, if any, helped produce Maudlin of the Well albums? And showing my idiocy, I had to look up what an ethnogen is. And ethnogen is a chemical substance used in a religious or shamanic ritual. So I'm assuming what Mike, can I call you Mike? What Mike's probably asking about is, he's probably asking about acid or mushrooms, or I suppose ayahuasca, maybe. At the time, I was pretty straight and narrow when it came to drugs. I was kind of a wimp. I drank a lot, as most people do when they go to college. And I smoked a lot of cigarettes, and drank a lot of coffee. So I don't think any of those count as ethnogens. Toby, without getting into too many details, was a little more experienced when it came to those kinds of things. And I am sure that some of them probably affected him in certain ways about how he went about writing things. I don't know if he ever wrote music under the influence, but things he experienced, I'm sure, kind of came into play as well. So, sorry I'm not more specific on that, but let me just say that there are certain things that I'm sure probably played a part. Although I don't think any of us ever did any kind of spiritual, shamanic kind of ritualistic kind of drug use. I know I didn't even know what ayahuasca was until I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast a few years ago. So, shows you how hip I am with the drug scene. But yeah, there you go. All right, next question comes from Stefan Gottlieb Kramer. And he asks, how did that wacky video for Pondering a Wall ever come about? The Pondering a Wall video, something that I think some of us wish wasn't as prevalent on the web as it is. I don't mind it, but I know some people find it kind of goofy. Well, as a lot of you know, Toby went to Hampshire College. Hampshire College is had a very big kind of art scene. A lot of cool people there, friends of Toby who I met when I visited, were all doing kind of interesting things, whether it be music, painting, photography, and videography. And so it's funny because Toby and I talked about this after the interview. It's not part of the interview, but I think we discussed it when we were kind of hanging around his house afterwards. And I don't think we can agree on when that came about, because I think he thinks it happened earlier in college. I pretty much remember it being part of during our senior year of college, 99 to 2000. Ben Lipsey, who is a really cool guy, who was friends with Toby when we were, from Hampshire, and he was doing a lot with video back then. And this is, again, this is like late 90s. This is before, digital cameras were pretty available. Video software was not super prevalent at the time. I remember even that Ben had a CD burner, which took forever to burn a CD. I remember that. But Ben was somebody who was very up to date with technology, and part of he was a big video guy. So part of his senior project, if I'm remembering correctly, was he wanted to make the video part of his portfolio. So he shot a lot of stuff at Hampshire, and you'll notice that all of the kind of sort of studio stuff, with Toby and Josh playing in front of a green screen and having the stuff happening around them. Some of the the non-live shots, you don't see me and you don't see Byron, and you don't see Maria Stella in those, or Taryn. And part of that was just, he just was filming stuff around the campus. He had Toby do a bunch of stuff in front of a green screen. He had Josh play some of the guitar parts in front of a green screen. He filmed Cass, who was our rhythm guitar player at the time, and Jason Bittner, our trumpet player. And then he interspersed it with footage from when Maudlin played the Worcester Metal Fest in early 2000. And I'm very positive that it's early 2000. I think Toby and I are in disagreement on that. But if memory serves correctly, we played in 2000 because I remember it was my senior year. And so he interspersed some live shots of us when we played. Funny thing about that too, as a side note, is that we played on the main stage, which was very, very cool. But we played at like noon, and we were like the first band. And so it's funny because you can see a little bit in the video that we're playing in front of the Misfits drum set. Dr. Chud, who was the drummer of the Misfits at the time, his big set was under a cloth, but you can still kind of see it. So that was, to me, that was always kind of an interesting experience. That was really my first gig, my first live gig with Maudlin of the Well. Toby had gotten together like some people to do a live performance during his college years, and it was like a one-off performance, which I was not able to take part in. But this was my first performance, so my nerves were pretty. I was, nervous and excited. My first time playing on stage with these guys, and we're playing the main stage at the Worcester Metal Fest, and we played at noon, so we were basically playing to the people who, were dumb enough to come early, because at that time you couldn't leave once you were in. I think you were kind of locked in there, and it's kind of a tight space, and you had you did exposed to a bunch of death metal for a long time. But so that's the video. It was done by a friend of Toby's for his college portfolio, his videography portfolio. And as such, it's lived on in infamy on the web during various places. And some people want to forget it, whatever. It was goofy. Of course it was goofy. We were young, we were like 20 years old when that video was made. But it's it brings back fond memories for me anyway. So there you go. There's one more down. Let's see the next question. Steve Wilson, am I pronouncing that right? Or Steve, but it's spelled Styv. He writes, how did Kayo Dot, Kayo Dot question, come to release on Zodic? Is there any chance of that happening again? Maybe this is a question for Toby. Again, I can kind of speak to this a little bit, so I don't know if Toby, what his response would be. I'm just going to kind of tell it from my perspective. And let me preface this by saying a lot of stories I might tell, which maybe have kind of negative connotations towards some people. I should say that, I've pretty much made peace with a lot of stuff that's happened in my past. And I mean no ill will towards anybody. And I don't mean to do this to deface anybody or say anything negative about anybody. So if anything I describe in this story sounds like that, just please be aware that it's not meant to be a jab. But yeah, it is kind of a weird story. So we released Bath and Leaving Your Body Map in 2001, and we had been working on it for about a year, recording, and we were very happy with it. Dark Symphonies, who was our label at the time, really put a lot of effort into getting it out there, getting us out there, which I'm going to speak to in a couple of the other questions that people have asked about. And So, we spent a long time kind of figuring what we were going to do next, because a brief history on Maudlin Llewellyn. Maudlin Llewellyn started mostly as a studio project. It started from a bunch of 4-track demos that Toby, Byron, and myself did in 1996. We did a 4-song demo, and then as Toby got more and more access to kind of the studio facilities at Hampshire, he started integrating other musicians, and we made 2 other demo tapes worth of music. All in all, probably about 20 songs, something like that. And when we got signed by Dark Symphonies in 1999, the idea was to take the best of those songs and kind of put them out as the first album. So a lot of what you hear on My Fruit Psychobells, Acid Combustible, which was the first Maudlin Llewellyn album, are the demos that we did at Hampshire College, kind of cleaned up. And at the time we were recording on an 8-track reel-to-reel, so there's little audio glitches here and there, just because we were running out of tracks. But when we brought it to the studio, I mean, we spent about 12 hours, and we basically mixed the songs that eventually became part of that album. So when we went in to do Bath and Leaving Your Body Map, we had, as you can imagine, a bunch of leftover songs from those other demos. Some songs we knew we didn't really want to work on, but Toby really had a great idea. He had some newer songs that he was bringing to it, and then he took the choice older songs. Some of them were written, had different parts to them. Some of them had different song titles, different lyrics. But we really put it together, and it was kind of a very purging thing, a catharsis. No pun intended, given our song title, Catharsis of Sea Sleep and Dreaming Shrines. But we really, and this is going to sound a little disgusting, but we kind of blew our load with Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. It was basically us purging everything that had been built up, everything that had been demoed from 1996 through 2000, as well as the new songs. We basically just cleaned the slate completely, which is why Bath and Leaving Your Body Map was a double album. And so we didn't have any leftover songs. So we were pretty much starting fresh when we were thinking about doing the next album. And around that time is when some of the ideas, I remember Toby and I rehearsing ideas that eventually became Manifold Curiosity. I remember going on vacation with my family around June of 2002 and listening to the demo of The Antique, and I believe Wayfarer at the time. Basically the songs that were going to become Choirs of the Eye, the first Kayo Dot album. But at the time, we were still Maudlin of the Well. We were still, this is basically going to be the next Maudlin of the Well album. And when I talk more about our live shows, you'll know that Maudlin of the Well actually played The Antique at one of our live shows. So anyway, and this is where it gets a little weird. So at the time, Dark Symphonies, our label, they were all in favor of the music, but they were going through, as a lot of indie labels do, they were going through financial issues. Nothing serious. I mean, they're still, I don't know if Dark Symphonies is still around, but I know Ted, who runs Dark Symphonies, is doing a kind of a vinyl business now, and he's re-releasing a lot of old death metal albums and on vinyl, and more power to him. I think it's great what he's doing. So all the respect in the world to you, Ted. But at the time, Dark Symphonies was, trying to get a bunch of different bands out there, and I think money just ran a little bit thin at the time. So as a result, we weren't able to record as quickly as we wanted to. We were booking time at the studio, but we weren't getting money from the record label. So we ended up putting a lot of our own money into some of these recording sessions. And, or I think it was around the end of 2002, we were just very frustrated because we didn't know what to do. The songs were pretty much there. They're mostly done, I believe, if I remember correctly. But we just didn't have the money to go in and finish them. So Toby kind of took it upon himself to just, I don't know the circumstances, and I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to do this to say anything bad about anybody, but he eventually just kind of sent an email along, or not an email, sorry. He sent a letter with a physical copy of the rough mixes of the songs at that time to John Zorn. And he just said, hey, we're in this situation. Our label is having money problems. We can't record. What do you think about this? And John Zorn, to his credit, got back to us and said, wow, I really like this music. I want to see this album done. Why don't you come over to Zodic? And, that began the process of, basically severing our contract with Dark Symphonies, which, is a whole other story, which I don't feel like we need to get into right now. But at the end of the day, we got money from Zodic. We paid back a bunch of money to Dark Symphonies, and we put in some more of our own money, and we basically finished the record. And then Zodic, paid for the mixing. Paid for the mastering. And that's how Choirs of the Eye came about, and that's how we went over to Zodic. And part of the reason for the name switch is just because, the music, as you can tell, is very different from Maudlin of the Well. It came from the same source. And the musicians who played on that first Kayo Dot album were still the musicians who were involved with Maudlin of the Well. But it was different enough that we decided, well, let's try this other band. And that's kind of the short answer to it. I remember my own personal thing is I didn't want to do it. I was nervous about changing the name at that point, but I went along with it, and thus was the birth of Kayo Dot. Now, in terms of will Kayo Dot ever be on Zodic again? That's not for me to answer because I'm not in the band anymore. I don't think that's going to be the case because, when we recorded the album for Zorn, I mean, he was very cool guy. But he runs his label in a very specific way, where every band who's on Zodic gets the same amount of money to record an album. There's a lot of packaging and artwork restrictions, which he purposely does. You'll notice that a lot of Zodic releases have the same kind of similar look. Not the same artwork, but the layout is usually the same. And, to his credit, it's just that, he has a very specific artistic way of wanting to promote his bands. And it's kind of a label where, it's got a built-in fan base. If you're a fan of Zodic, you'll pretty much buy any record that they put out. And they don't do, I believe they don't do digital distribution on it, which is one of the reasons why you can't find Choirs of the Eye on iTunes or on Bandcamp or on Spotify or anything. And, it all comes back to Zorn's own personal view on how music should be released. And I think he does right by his artists. I don't think he does it to be a dickhead. I think he does it because, he's got a very specific, he's been around a while and the proof is in the pudding. Zodic is a well-known, well-regarded label, and Zorn exercises a certain amount of control over the presentation of his artists, but at the end of the day, it works for him. So will Kayo Dot ever do that again? Maybe. Who knows? Maybe. But my recollection of the time is that they put out the Kayo Dot album, and then Zorn really wanted Toby to do a solo album, which is why In the La La Library Loft came out, which I'll talk about more in my interview with Toby. And then after that, we kind of said, okay, we've got our foot in the door. It was a huge boost to our reputation to have the album out on Zodic and to have the kind of Zorn stamp of approval. I think that did wonders for what we were trying to do. It gave us this kind of instant credibility, which helped with booking shows and getting another record deal. And so, for everything I say about his, the artistic control, I mean, he didn't have control over the music, obviously. He wasn't that kind of a guy, but to how the album was presented and everything, it did wonders for us. So I have no ill will at all towards Zorn. I think he's an amazing musician and an amazing composer, and he's from the little bit from where I met him, he was an amazing guy. I didn't really interact with him too much, but I thought he was a swell guy, and he did a lot for us. And again, the proof is in the pudding, because not only is Zodic a well-regarded label to be on, but everything he did for Kayo Dot pretty much set up Kayo Dot for the road that they've been on. And it's been hard at times, but like I said, instant credibility. John Zorn likes this band. And if John Zorn says this band is good, a bunch of record labels, a bunch of people, a bunch of reviewers are going to take notice. And, we might not have gotten that if we had, finished the album on Dark Symphonies. Who knows? It's kind of hindsight 2020. So who knows what would have happened if Dark Symphonies was able to finish funding that album, and it came out on Dark Symphonies as the third Maudlin of the Well album. Who knows if it would have had the effect that it did, or we would have gone as far as we did. There's not really any way we can, figure that out. So, but yeah, so thanks John Zorn, and thanks Dark Symphonies. Dark Symphonies gave us our start. They got us out there. John Zorn took us to this next level with Kayo Dot, and, just look at what's happened since, and you'll see that they both of those labels did a lot for us. So okay, hope that answered your question, Stiv, however you pronounce your name. Okay, let's see what's next. I'm actually reading these out of order, so I'm trying to remember. Okay, Andrew Robbins writes, what is your personal favorite Maudlin the Well album based on the music alone? Well, because they're the same album, it's just a double album. I have to say Bath and Leaving Your Body Map because, um, and of the two, I don't know if I can really choose. Because, My Fruit Psychobells was very much a rushed affair. It was 7 songs that were mixed in 12 hours. They were rough recordings that were given as much of a shine as you could do in a studio for 12 hours, and I don't know if they were very representative of what the band could do. Whereas Bath and Leaving Your Body Map, as evidenced by the fact that 13 years later you're all asking me questions about it, they stand the test of time. And they were incredibly amazing albums to be part of for the little amount of time that I was in the studio for them. And, they were the musical, zenith of what we were trying to do at the time. Between adding the other instruments and what we could do as musicians, it was very much a big thing for us. So, Bath or Leaving Your Body Map. Or Bath and Leaving Your Body Map, which I lumped together. So, there you go. What's next here? Let's see. We only got a couple more questions left. Okay. Jonathan Norin Brandstrom. There's a lot of umlauts and apostrophes above letters in your name, so I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. But he writes, how did the ideas come about? Ideas being musically, lyrically concepts. Did Maudlin the Well create full-blown compositions, or did you come up with ideas and later revisiting them, adding instrumentation, doing rearrangements? Was there a certain process with every album/release? Well, I hope this will address your question. Like I said, we had a bunch of material left over after My Fruit Psychobells. These were songs that were fully formed compositional ideas, but we definitely revisited them when it came time to record the Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. And that goes mainly to Toby and Sam. Toby being obviously guitar player, singer, songwriter, and Sam, our drummer. Those two really put the album together. They went through the material. They found the songs that would work. They edited the songs. They got rid of certain parts in certain songs, added parts to certain songs, made the songs more complete. Just on a basic level, just guitar and drum level. And so once that was done, we really... And these were very, very fond times for me. Because at the time I lived with Taryn and Byron. Toby and Sam and Josh lived down the street. Nick Kite had just recently joined the band on bass. And so we would have these mapping sessions at our house where we would get together. We would listen to the songs and we would, as a band, decide what we wanted to do with them. And, we would throw out ideas like, oh, I hear... a violin thing here, or I hear something here, and we would write them down, and we'd write down the ideas, we'd talk about them, we'd discuss them, we'd poo-poo them, or say, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and it gave us a chance to say, like, okay, well, if you want this part here, then you need to write it, so as an example, and I think I gave this in an interview too a while ago, in Birth Pains of Astral Projection, there was a part in the song where Taryn and I, said, oh, what would be cool here is why don't we do like kind of a keyboard guitar solo thing? And Toby was like, well, I don't know if I hear that there, but come up with something and let's see what you come up with. And so Taryn and I worked on it. Taryn came up with an organ part. And then I came up with a basic idea of what that guitar solo became. And we were able to keep it in the song, and that was one of the things that we discussed during our mapping session. So we discussed, what other instruments were going where. Should there be a trumpet part here? Should there be violin? Should there be cello? And when you do that, you kind of create this mental checklist for yourself, or a physical checklist in this regard. And if I remember correctly, the idea came from an interview that Toby read with King Diamond, where he said that when they were doing the albums, Them and Abigail, is they would do that. They'd say, okay, we're going to do a keyboard thing here. We're going to do a guitar solo here. We're going to have this here, this here. And that way, when you were in the studio, you wouldn't forget what you need to do for a specific song. Like, oh, there has to be a harmony guitar here, things like that. So we took that idea and we applied it in our own way, which was, these maps. And a little side note, hopefully they won't get mad for me explaining this, but there was a song, the song Birth Pains of Astral Projection was actually originally called Leaving Your Body. And we were working on it one day, and so obviously the piece of paper that we were working on said Leaving Your Body Map. And the song eventually became known as Birth Pains of Astral Projection, but those words, Leaving Your Body Map, then we just kind of took and turned that into the album title. So, yeah, that was, it was a cool process, and it was very much, as much as Toby had control in terms of writing the songs, the basic songs, everybody was pretty involved with that mapping process, and so it was a good chance to kind of democratically voice your opinion about a certain part. And obviously Toby had the final veto on that, but it was definitely a cool thing to be involved with, and good times. So hope that answers your question, Jonathan. And let's see, how many more questions do I have here? Okay, let's see. I think I only have one more question. Sorry if I'm stumbling here. Okay, actually, one just came in last minute. Emil Ekholm writes, is there any chance Maudlin of the Well would ever reunite again for the purpose of re-recording old material? What surprised me about part the second was that it was all new and didn't include any of the tracks that are rumored to be on demos that may or may not have seen the light of day. I would pay good money for re-recordings of the tracks that became bonuses on some CD reissues. And he lists some songs. He says Beauty, The Crystal Margin, which were bonus tracks that were on the re-release of Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. And then he said more so for Banquet of Dees, Dandelion, Swarming, He Who Breathes the Soil, and In the Magnificent Nothing, if those are even real. Well, Emil, this is a very good question, and I am probably drunk enough where I can explain this. By the way, don't drink and drive. That's my little PSA for this. Beauty and The Crystal Margin were probably the best of those demos. Because like I said, we recorded demos. We did Beget. No, wait. Sorry. What was the first? That's sad. I don't even remember the name of the first. Oh, Through Languid Veins was the first demo we did. That's had Beauty, The Ocean, the Kingdom, and the Temptation, He Who Breathes the Soil, and I believe that was In the Magnificent Nothing. It was a 4-song demo we did in 1996 on a 4-track. Obviously, Ocean, the Kingdom, and the Temptation we re-recorded for one of the later demos, and that became part of the first album. Beauty was included as a bonus track. Beauty was actually the first official Maudlin track that was done by all three of us. I believe Byron and Toby wrote a song before that, but Beauty was the first song we did before we were even known as Maudlin of the Well. It was done in summer of '96, and it was done kind of as we were all going away to college. We were all going different places, and let's just, do this to, do something with each other musically before we go our separate ways. And that's kind of how Beauty came about. And then it worked out so well that Toby came up with more songs. And then throughout the rest of 96, that late part of 96, we collaborated on the other songs. And then Christmas of 96, when we were all back home, we went out and we mixed the songs down and we created a demo tape. And that's how Through Languid Veins came. That's when we came up with the name Maudlin of the Well. And we did our very first promo photographs, which are very, very funny looking. So he mentions these other songs, so let me kind of speak to them. So first of all, He Who Breathes the Soil and In the Magnificent Nothing are both from Through Languid Veins. And as far as I know, there's no reason to re-record them. I guess if you're going to pay us a lot of money, we'll do it. But at the time, In the Magnificent Nothing was probably not our best. I think of the 4 songs on that demo tape was probably the least favorite of everybody. It had some good parts to it. Specifically, I can remember there's a part in the song which is a trade-off solo between me and Toby on clarinet, and we recorded it in the living room of his parents' house. And it's all live, no overdubs, no edits. And it's just because, we only had a 4-track, so we only had 1 track to do the whole thing. So we just kind of did that live in the living room, which is really, really funny. He Who Breathes the Soil was another, it was a good song. It was fun to play. Another funny anecdote about that is I did the guitar solos for that song, again, in Toby's living room. And I was just kind of plugged into a Digitech kind of multi-effects pedal that he was borrowing from Josh, and I was recording the solos while Byron and Toby were watching Pulp Fiction. So that's kind of funny. It's like, and it was on in the background while I was doing it, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. Banquet of Dees. The reason why you won't ever hear Banquet of Dees be re-recorded is because Banquet of Dees became... what song did it become? Holy shit. I forget. Well, Banquet of Dees became one of the songs on Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. So you'll never hear it because it was already re-recorded and repurposed and redone. Banquet of Dees was Rises He the Numberless. There you go. Swarming. Swarming. Again, I don't know what that one's gonna ever become, if anything. That was another. It was a weird song. What was kind of notable about it, I actually revisited it a few years ago when I listened to the demo tape again, and I remember. It was done. My parts for the song were done during one of those marathon sessions where I would go up to Hampshire and basically take a weekend, and we would record from like 12 midnight or 11 o'clock in the night until like 5 in the morning, and I would just do guitar solos one right after the other, and my fingers hurt and were bleeding afterwards. But Swarming was one of those ones. It was part of the demo session where Byron wasn't really involved with the lyric writing process, so they were all kind of Toby songs, and that was when we first met Maria Stella, and I just remember having fun with Swarming because that was where I got to do a harmony guitar solo, which is not something I did a lot of in Maudlin of the Well stuff. And Dandelion. I don't actually remember that song. I think there was one EP of material Toby did which didn't actually involve me or Byron, and it might be on that, but that song doesn't ring a bell. So funny anecdotes aside, Is there any chance Maudlin and Well would ever reunite again for the purpose of re-recording old material? To be honest, Emil, I don't really think that's going to happen anytime soon. Part the Second was kind of a one-off thing where there were some old ideas, despite what you may think, that were included, but it also was some new material. And it was just kind of, Toby floated the idea. People paid us to do it. They funded the recording. We didn't get paid personally, but, we raised enough money to do it. And, we were like, why not? Let's do it. And that was a really fun session. I really wish I had been around for more of those sessions. At the time, I was actually listening back to Part the Second, and I had forgotten some of the songs. There are no plans right now for reuniting for that purpose. But, like everything else, I will never say never. The guys who were involved with Maudlin of the Well, me, Toby, Byron, Josh, Sam, Taryn, we're all on really good speaking terms. Obviously I hang out with Toby a bunch, hang out with Byron a bunch. Anytime I'm around, I'll hang out with Josh. And I was actually in San Francisco last year, and I visited Taryn and Sam. So we're all still good friends, and we all still, keep up our musical chops in one way or another. So never say never. We may do something. And I have to be cryptic, though, because there's nothing on the books as of right now. But who knows what might happen. So we'll see. So if you guys want to hear more Maudlin of the Well material, email Toby or send us money, and we'll gladly do it if people foot the studio bill. But as for redoing some of these old songs, I can tell you, I think we've moved so far beyond what they were. I mean, I don't know if He Who Breathes the Soil and In the Magnificent Nothing will ever see the light of day. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with those songs. I mean, what you heard on Bath and Leaving Your Body Map is pretty much the like I said before, the zenith of what we could accomplish as musicians with the material that we had built up over 3 years or so of demoing. Okay, so thank you, Emil. That was a really cool question, though. And looks like I think we only have one more question. And I saved this one for last because this is one I could probably talk about for hours on end. So strap yourself in, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a long answer. And who submitted it? Let's see. Anthony Martinez. He wrote, "What were Maudlin of the Well shows like?" Very good question, Anthony. Maudlin of the Well shows. Again, Maudlin of the Well is so mired in kind of mystery because of the time period we were active. People kind of, I think, build it up in their heads of what we were like to see or witness. Truth of the matter is, from the time we were active as a live performing group, which was between 2000 and 2002, which was our last gig, I can count the shows that Maudlin of the Well did on probably two hands, maybe three, I guess. We didn't do a lot of shows. And one thing I should stress, too, is that when you're in a band, part of the learning curve that you go through is how to perform live. How does the band... You can have friends who you play music with, and, when you're just jamming together, it sounds really, really awesome. But then you write a song, and how does that song translate to a live audience? How do you perform that song live? How do you guys gel in a live performance? How do you, when you're on stage, how do you get used to things that can occur? If somebody messes up a part, how do you recover from that? Somebody breaks a string. These are all learning experiences that live musicians go through in their earliest bands. And especially for me, Maudlin was my earliest band. So my recollection of a lot of Maudlin shows was chaos, things that could go wrong, going wrong. And it was a big learning experience. Just as a side note, Ballasette, my current band, did a show a couple weeks ago, and during the show, I encountered a number of technical difficulties. For one, my contacts got all blurry, so I was having trouble seeing. Two, my pedal board was giving me problems, partly because I didn't check the settings ahead of time and just kind of assumed everything was okay. And I learned the hard way that it wasn't. And so there's a lot of on-the-fly kind of stuff going on. And to say it was one of my worst performances, would be a pretty accurate statement. I was not very happy with my performance after that show. But at the end of the day, when I went home that night, I was a little bummed. I woke up the next morning and I kind of got over it. And you may say to yourself, well, how can you do that? You screwed up in front of people. That must have been mortifying. And part of the reason I'm able to deal with these kinds of things is partly due in part to the did I use part too many times there? Whatever. Due to my experiences with Kayo Dot and with Maudlin. I'm used to things going wrong. If a gig goes perfectly, that's amazing. It's an amazing experience. It's a 1 in a million kind of experience. And I learned the hard way through various things. And so the Maudlin shows were very weird because, again, it was a group of musicians who were just starting to get to know each other. So let's talk about a few of them. And this is where I gotta take another drink. Pour another drink. Let's go. So, I can pretty much remember most of the Maudlin songs, most of the Maudlin shows pretty vividly in my memory. If you ask me about a specific Kayo Dot show, I may not remember it. Certain ones I do, certain ones I don't. But, because there's so many of them. But Maudlin each had their, like I said, chaos. We had a lot of interesting experiences. Like I said, I mentioned before, we did our first gig at the Worcester Metal Fest, playing on the main stage. That was fun. Again, it was fun for me as a young musician, finally getting out there and playing with people that I love and, doing our original music. But it was definitely not all it was cracked up to be, because part of it was we were dealing with sound people for the first time, and there was a video that was taken. Don't ask me for it because I don't have it and I don't know what happened to it. But there was a video of that performance taken, and there's a funny part where it was taken from behind the soundboard, and there's a part when we're setting up where Toby asks, innocently enough, "Hey, can you put a little delay on my vocal mic?" And you can audibly hear the sound guy go, "You could pay me." And so, that was, that was kind of our introduction to the world of sound guys who are not always your friend. Sometimes they are. But it was tough for us because Maudlin was a unique entity, and especially those first few gigs we did a lot of metal festivals. We did the Worcester Metal Festival. We did the Milwaukee Metal Festival in 2000. We did the New Jersey Metal Festival in 2001, and then we did the Milwaukee Festival again. And those first few gigs were fucking weird, man. I gotta be honest. Like, part of it was I can talk about our first Milwaukee Metal Fest experience. So at the time, we didn't really have a base of location. We hadn't all moved to Boston but at that point, and so we caravanned out to Milwaukee. We split the band between 3 different cars. We were playing with 10 people were in the band at that point. And one of whom, I don't even remember her name, but she played sax for us. She was nice. I got along with her, but I very barely, talked with her. And that was kind of our first big trip as a band. We're like, oh, we're going out to Milwaukee. And, we left Toby's parents' house in Connecticut. And it was me, Toby, Byron, and I think Taryn was with us. So it was the 4 of us going out to Milwaukee on our own. And I remember that it was a crazy experience. We were barely on the road for, I think, an hour, if that. We were listening to King Diamond's Abigail in the car, and traffic was stopped, like really stopped, like no one was moving. And the King Diamond song that was on was Deadly Omens, off of, or Omens, I should rather say, off of Abigail. And what had happened was some guy had, in Connecticut, I forget where in Connecticut it was, he had jumped off of a bridge to commit suicide, or an overpass, and he hit a truck on the top of the truck, fell, bounced off of the truck onto the highway, got hit by another car, and dragged before the car really knew what was going on. And so talk about deadly omens. I feel sorry for that guy. I hope he's, found some sort of peace for his spirit. But, it was crazy because at that time, we found out, we leaned out the door and someone came to the car and said, oh, well, the reason why traffic is stopped is because the police are trying to recover enough to be able to say they have a body. And that's where I learned the hard way that when somebody's murdered or dies, you need to have a certain percentage of the body in order to consider it a body. I forget what the percentage is. I forget if it's 75% or something like that. So because this guy got dragged and part of his, body was separated, they were still collecting pieces. And so that was our first trip to Milwaukee. And, the first Milwaukee Metal Fest was fun. I don't remember any bad things. We got a pretty decent set. Fun fact, I think actually Opeth had to borrow our kick drum pedal for that, our double kick pedal for that show, because we played on the same stage as them at that time, because they weren't really the huge band that they were, that they are now. So yeah, it was just a weird experience, Milwaukee. Those metal festivals, I don't know how many of them are around anymore. I don't think Jack Koshik, who's the guy who did them, I can pretty much say he's a sleazebag. I think most people will agree with me. But he ran these metal festivals in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Maybe he still does stuff. I don't know. Jack Koshik, I don't know. I felt like you were kind of a sleazebag. Prove me wrong. If you disagree with that assessment, get in contact with me, colorofairpodcast@gmail.com, and, explain yourself more. But my experience is that he was a sleazebag. Because these metal festivals, and granted, there's other metal festivals now which probably are run the same way, but they were kind of pay-to-play kind of things, where an independent band, if you wanted to be, oh, my band is going to play the Milwaukee Metal Festival, you would pay, I think it was like $500 or $1,000. No, I think it was $1,000. So an independent band, you're like, oh, I want to play the Milwaukee Metal Fest. You contact them and they'd say, well, pay us $1,000 and you can play the Milwaukee Metal Fest. And then the kind of thing they would do is they would give you 20 tickets to the festival, which you were supposed to sell for $50 a piece. And that way, you'd make back your money, which is the typical pay-to-play scam that a lot of bands encounter with certain clubs. So as a result, you had a lot of small bands who were just packed into these shows, and it was like wall-to-wall death metal. At least that's what it seemed to me. And there were a few bands, when you really got to the headliners, that's when the real good stuff started coming out, because I remember that first year, I think I saw Children of Bodom and Anathema and Mastodon. No, Mastodon wasn't even there. Sorry. I saw ISIS, and a few other bands. It was kind of weird. It was kind of crazy, and I remember just kind of being in awe. It was kind of a fun little experience. We all stayed at I believe it's called the Roosevelt Hotel. All I know is that it's where Jeffrey Dahmer killed one of his people. So there's a room that's not available there anymore, because that's the room he used. It was fun. It was fun, and I remember one of the things about it that was kind of interesting was that I think the stage we were playing at, we were actually supposed to go on later, but Malevolent Creation had canceled, and so we ended up taking what was supposed to be Malevolent Creation's spot. And for that first show, I forget our set list, but I do know we played Blight of River Systems, which is our poppiest song. And I remember just the fact that we had the saxophones, and Taryn had his saxophones. I remember somebody, like, as soon as we started playing, leaving, or I was told, I didn't see it myself, but he was leaving, and as he left, he held up his hand and held up his middle finger as he was walking away, to show his opinion of what we were doing. So yeah, I mean, and that was kind of the thing. I mean, we played Milwaukee, we played the New Jersey Metal Festival, where the stage got shut down because the stage next to us was Bad Luck 13 Riot Extravaganza, and they set a fire, which put a damper on our set. Like I said, chaos. It was crazy to be told in the middle of your set, hey, stop playing. There's fire people coming in, and it delayed the whole festival. And I think part of the problem was that they didn't just tell us to get off stage, and so that when it resumed, they would go to the next band. They just told us to stay on stage, and when everything was kind of cleared up at the fire, we resumed our set. But it put a delay in the rest of the the rest of the day, and I feel bad about that, because I found out later that Sentenced, who some of you might know is a metal band from Finland, they came all the way over to do that show, ended up being only be able to play for 15 or 20 minutes because the whole thing got delayed. So I feel kind of bad that they let us play still. I think we should have just said, okay, well, we'll tear our shit down and have the other band come up, because it ended up just ruining the rest of the day for everybody. So like I said, chaos. I remember another gig we did. We played in Utica, New York, and we played at this place called Virgo Bats and Leo Frogs, and that was actually a pretty cool show. That for the most part, that was the first show where we got to do like a full set, like a full hour and a half long set. And I remember just like the amount of material we were trying to play, and I know a lot of you would say, oh, an hour and a half long Maudlin set, that would be awesome. To be fair, it was really tough to make it. We were still new to the idea of making set lists, and to go from playing 20-25 minutes at a metal fest to playing an hour and a half was fucking difficult. And to get the set list right and the transitions right, it was tough. It was definitely not our best gig. We played pretty well from what I remember. But yeah, there's like other memories. We played at Hampshire College in a shed, I think, or something like that, and that was a lot of fun. We played at Wesleyan University, which is another fun gig. I remember that fondly just because my mom came to it, and she brought a friend of hers, and there were a bunch of people on various drugs dancing around them with their shirts off. And that was a lot of fun. We played at the Worcester Palladium. We opened up for Moonspell and Lacuna Coil, and that was at the upstairs at the Worcester Palladium. And that again, you learn shit on the job. That was one where I had a backup guitar, we had such a short set that I just figured I could use one guitar to play the whole set. And then sure enough, I broke a song. Broke a song. I broke a string while we were playing Heaven and Weak, and I had to run out because my backup guitar was in the car, which was parked, however far away, and so and it was snowing, and I had to run in the snow like 3 blocks down the street to get it, and I missed the second song of the set, and then got back just in time for Birth Pains of Astral Projection. So yeah, fun times. So yeah, I mean, like I said, Maudlin on the Well shows, there's only a handful of them, and there were some that were good. To say that we did a perfect show as a band would be a stretch, because I felt like there was something that went wrong or something that went a little off at every show. We played at this club called Connections in Clifton, New Jersey, and I think of all the shows we did, that was probably the one we did that had the least amount of problems. But it was a weird time, and like I said, we're shrouded in mystery. I acknowledge that, but you're not really missing much with these shows. What you really had was a bunch of guys who were excellent musicians. We had done albums that were really, really, really good. I'm to this day very, very proud of what we did, and to be able to do that live was really hard. And we did the best we could for a young band who was just learning how to play music on a stage with each other, and we did the best we could, and we had some good times, we had some bad times, but it was a learning experience, and that's pretty much what I can kind of sum up the whole Maudlin on the Well time from 1996 to 2000, when we were just doing demos, and seeing Toby grow as a songwriter, learning how my particular style could fit in with the band, learning about how to become a better lead guitar player, learning about putting songs together, to being in the studio and trying to actually make a really good album, from 2000 to 2001 when we did Bath and Leave Me Your Body Map, to then taking it to the next level, which eventually became Kayo Dot. So, maybe someday I actually kind of half thought about going over probably the worst gig experience of our life, which was Prog West in 2002. But I think I'll save that for another podcast, because I've already blabbered on for a long time, and yeah, I think you all deserve a break from my lovely voice. But thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed these questions and answers. And please, if you have any other questions about Maudlin on the Well or about Kayo Dot, please feel free to send them in. colorofairpodcast@gmail.com. I would love if you asked me questions about Balisette, because that's my current project, but I realize it's not shrouded in as much mystique as Maudlin on the Well is. So I can understand if you don't have questions about that. But what I can tell you is that Balisette is going back into the studio to finish our second album. And I really, truly believe you people are going to be impressed by it. At least I hope you are, because we're putting a lot of love and a lot of care and time into it. And we have a good group of people in the band. And it's not Maudlin on the Well. It's not Kayo Dot. Don't expect avant-garde rock and roll. But it's, powerful music done in an honest way, with really good musicians. And I really believe this next album is going to be something special. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, we will see you soon here at The Color of Air.
feel.